was 8 years old, 5 hours disappeared from my life. 5 hours, gone without a trace.
Are you ready? Here we go.
Tonight on World of Mystery, we investigate the terrifying world of UFOs.
I think I was taken too. I keep a log of all my dreams. Someone else is with me. Another boy.
You're on your way to uncovering the truth. Maybe concentrate on that other boy in your dreams. He could help you find the answers you're looking for.
I know all Neil's secrets. There's shit there you don't even want to know about, trust me.
I'm looking for an Ann McCormick.
I was bleeding! I kept passing out! I went my fucking bed and you never asked why! I'm so fucking sick of this stinking little butt crack of a town! Go, go, go!
What happened that summer? It's a huge part of me.
Hello, welcome to Movie Humpers.
Hi,
I'm Bob Sham.
I'm Angela.
The sounds you might hear are dogs or are crying because we'll be talking about this sad fucking movie.
Yeah.
We thought maybe Rainer Werner Fassbinder might give us our sad movie, but boy, this Mysterious Skin, directed by Gregg Araki, who did Doom Generation, which was kind of a formidable. One of those crazy movies that got passed around. That's kind of our generation.
Absolutely, because that was like late 90s.
But I haven't seen that many of his movies, so.
I've only seen that and Nowhere. I don't think I've seen any other ones.
We'll have to go back. Off the top, this movie's very good.
It is a very good movie.
But it is Mysterious Skin. It stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
In the best thing we've ever seen him in.
2000s era Joseph Gordon-Levitt. JGL, we call him.
I don't call him that.
2000s era JGL.
I call him Joe.
Is kind of very experimental. He's kind of trying some shit out.
Yeah.
He's getting that. He's washing the third rock from the sun off of him.
Yes, he is.
He's really diving into some crazy stuff. 2000s era JGL, JoGoLe.
Oh my God.
JoGoLe, we call him.
No.
That sounds kind of good though, right?
JoGoLe.
JoGoLe. This movie also stars Brady Corbet, Michelle Trachtenberg, who was Alex Mack or Harriet the Spy or some shit. I think she was
Harriet the Spy.
Yeah, Jeff Lisson, Marilyn Rice Cub, and Elizabeth Shue.
Yeah.
Good old Elizabeth Shue.
Now, the names of the main boys are Brian
And Neil.
and Neil is Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And before we ever see these men, we're introduced to them as children.
Yeah. We see a young Brian who appears to have missing time, and his parents find him alone, and he's got a nosebleed. He's got kind of your typical homemaker mom, but a dad who's never around and kind of is emotionally distant.
And they split later on, and he barely sees his father.
Right.
But yeah, his dad and sister are home, but his sister finds him hiding in a cellar with a bloody nose.
Neil is a guy who's with his mom, who dates around a lot, very much a single household. There's no mention of a father here at all. Mm-hmm. And he realizes at a young age that he is gay after watching one of his mom's boyfriends. Oh, we should say off the top that we're dealing with themes of childhood sexual abuse.
Yes.
We're not going to go as hardcore about this movie as this movie does in its description.
No, I don't think we should.
But I will say that this movie is very critically acclaimed and very well regarded, and showing very realistically the long-term past that childhood sexual abuse can have on people.
Yes, and it's also one of the more realistic depictions of grooming
Yes.
that we've seen as well, because a lot of times I feel like this does a better job than anything I've ever seen in showing how a person who is an authority figure can take advantage of that, but also very slowly convince a child that they want to be doing what they're doing. Like, that's why this was extra disturbing, is because you could understand how it happened.
Yeah.
Not the why of it, because the guy's a fucking predator, right? But how the child would be so confused. And Neil, both of these boys were abused by the same man. But Neil remembers everything about it because it was an entire summer of his life. Brian
Yeah.
Brian has missing time 2 times in his life. And he has these nosebleeds. He's very traumatized in a different way than Neil is. They both are. But Brian also has blackouts.
Yes.
Like, he seems to not be able to handle much.
Yeah.
Without there being a nosebleed or a blackout. He just doesn't. He's very awkward.
Thinks that he's had alien abduction experiences.
Yeah.
And there actually is a scene where Brian and his mom, and I guess his sister, they go out and they see a UFO.
He does see a UFO like a week after his time lapsed.
It's hard to say if he kind of just put that memory into himself or if that actually happened, but his mother was there as well. So there
But
could
we
be
never
this
hear from her or his sister that it happened.
there could be this random subplot where we don't think he was abducted, but did they really see a UFO?
I do not believe that they did, because later when he tries to sit down with his mom to watch the alien abduction show,
he's
and he
uninterested.
finds Marilyn Rice Cub, she's like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you'd seen a UFO with your own eyes, I don't think you'd completely write off someone's abduction story.
Yeah.
You might at least be
That's
like,
true.
you know, you might at least be like, oh, because there's a girl, Marilyn Rice Cup lives like a town over. And so you'd think that you'd be sitting there, if you really saw it, you'd go, oh shit. Brian, do you remember when we saw the UFO?
Yeah.
Maybe this has related to that girl. I don't know.
You're totally right. He just kind of filled up the trauma gaps with that. So
I think he maybe had a dream, maybe in one of his blackouts. I don't know.
we see Neil, and he is like this young hustler. He's very like hypersexualized. He's out in the world.
Everyone loves him and wants to be with him.
Yeah, he's like a good-looking kid, but he's also literally a hustler boy who has slept with every John in this small town.
Yeah, his 2 best friends are the girl that he's grown up with,
Michelle Trachtenberg,
and this boy that's new to town who is also a gay teenage boy.
He is gay, yes.
I didn't mean to say it that way.
He's one of those gays.
Oftentimes he'll leave his friends to go pick up a John, and he'll just be like, come pick me back up at X time or whatever. And there's a scene between Michelle and this boy where she's like, I see how you look at him and you need to fucking be careful.
Yeah.
And she basically tells him, I used to be in love with him too, but where most people have a heart, he has a black hole. And you have to be careful not to get sucked into it. And the boy basically is like, but look at him, he's like a god. Like, they just...
Everybody wants JoGoLe.
He is an attractive person. Yeah. He always has been. But there is, like you said, there's this hypersexualization, and then also the not giving a fuck. Like, we all knew someone like this in high school who was just so attractive because they didn't give a fuck. There was a guy in my social studies class who'd failed social studies like twice, and he was a senior and I was a sophomore, and I had the biggest crush on him. We never spoke. But he had that thing about him where, like, he would smoke outside of school between classes, and he drove like an old beat up muscle car, just one of those dudes that you're like, oh god, that's cool.
So we get a lot of history into Neil first.
Yeah.
When he encounters this little league coach. And we get the slow burn grooming. Kind of clever how Gregg Araki, because apparently this stuff was filmed and set up in a way in which the child actors didn't really know like what the context of the scenes they were in.
Thank God.
And when you think about how it was all put together, extremely well done. And Gregg Araki, I know he has these very much like intense moments. And I know in his movies, like violence is a thing, and there is certain flashes of like extremity when people react to things, but then it all is like weirdly grounded, surrounded this story of like an extreme abuse occurrence. But this is also the first movie Gregg Araki has made that is based upon the works of someone else, a novel by the same name, and you'll see the ticker there. I can't remember the guy's name.
It was told very well. The way that it was shot, you didn't actually see anything happen that was physical. Not even kissing, nothing, and thank goodness.
Yeah.
But you do wonder, now thinking back on it after you telling me that, there are times where they would be together, but it was so well done you couldn't tell, but I'm sure certain things were ADR, right? Like the male grown actor was saying these things, but not in front of this child.
Right.
But the way it was set up, it was so disturbing in how like real it felt. So that makes me very happy to know that those boys were not actually put through knowing what they were supposed to be reacting to. Extra bonus points to Gregg Araki for getting the emotions from those children. That he did without going into that.
This movie is like kind of like I said, it's regarded in its realism of this type of the problems that stem from childhood sexual abuse. This movie is almost oddly clinical in a way, and what you can learn from it. And there's short of actually showing the horrid act, which thank God, of course we don't ever want to see that.
No.
But short of that, it's as stark as it can be in terms of its revelation. And so, we kind of bounce through their adolescence, but then we rest around when they're 19 years old. And it takes, I think it's like 91 is the year that we settle on here.
Yeah, and Michelle Trachtenberg moves to New York, and eventually Neil follows her.
Yeah.
And around the time Neil leaves is when Brian is trying to figure out what happened to him, and he and Marilyn Ricecup have decided that he was also abducted, but he starts having these flashbacks. The more he thinks about it, the more he starts remembering, right? And he's always like tried to not think about it, but now he's trying to remember more details, and he remembers Neil as a child, and he finds this photo of their Little League team. It was the Little League coach. I don't think we've said that yet.
Yeah.
But it's one of those crazy things where the Little League coach he picked Neil seemingly because Neil had a single mom who worked a bunch of jobs, who was always away, and like he offered to like drive Neil home a few times, and then he would just bring Neil to his house, and they would be there doing all the awful things that we're doing, and his mom never knew, and Neil never told because he was convinced that he was in it too. And it's also one of those terrible situations where the coach actually like sort of made him part of getting other boys, which is what happened to Brian.
Brian is going to this house where the UFO abducted girl is, a Marilyn Ricecup.
Yeah.
She lives with her grandfather, who's very wary when he pulls up. And she's always wearing these like nightgowns.
Yeah, it's like a house dress, like an old lady house dress.
And that's like her costume. And you kind of get, of course, you immediately, that Brian was not abducted.
Absolutely.
This is trauma regarding childhood sexual abuse. But of course, the implication here is that that's also Marilyn Ricecup's problem as well.
She does at some point show him a deer that has no genitalia.
Yeah.
She also shows him a scar on her leg. But listen, I mean, we've heard a million stories like this. Yeah, you do think, like, is that also what happened to her? Because that's way more likely than alien.
So Neil's trying to make it in New York. And he kind of gets a sandwich job at some point, but he's still hustling.
Well, what I was going to say is that Brian shows up to his house to try to meet him and ask him questions. And it's like the day Neil left for New York. So he then becomes friends with the one friend that's left in town. That's all I was going to say about him. So he kind of starts to come out of his shell. But he still thinks he was abducted. And he wants to talk to Neil. And they're trying to like get a hold of Neil to like confirm his story.
Brian meets Neil's gay friend and they get along so well. And Brian is...
Eric, I think?
Yeah, and Brian is essentially asexual. They kind of throw that word around with him. Like, he's just kind of self-repressed in that sexuality.
Yeah.
And I think that's the result of his trauma, is missing time. And Neil went the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So Neil's trying to make it in New York, and he's still kind of hustling, even though his friend doesn't want him to. Certain encounters, and there's one where he meets a man and he's covered in legions. And of course, this is the early 90s. He has AIDS and the guy doesn't want to sleep with him. He just wants to be like touched and kind of massaged. So it's very, oh, and there's another one where he first gets to John and the John hands him a condom. And
Neil's like never used a condom.
He's never used a condom. There's a point where it said that he's got crabs at some point.
Right before he leaves.
He hasn't, he hasn't ever even protected himself. And up until this point with this guy, he never even thought about it.
Yeah, it's like, and he tells his friend later, because he's living with her, that it was the first time that it had not been just like a purely enjoyable sexual experience is when he met this man with the lesions, because it made him think about things,
the consequences.
That scene really got to me. I mean, obviously you knew it was happening. He obviously picked him up, and when he took the lesions off, he was like, he looked at him and he's like, don't worry, I promise you this will be the safest encounter you've ever had. Because he just wanted someone to touch him. And Neil does tell his friend later that he did jack off across the room from the man, but the man was like, I just want to watch you.
Yeah.
But there was the man was not going to put him in danger. That was really intense, and I do think that it made him kind of realize, and that's when he decided to, okay, I'll go work at this sandwich shop. Like, I'll try to go straight, basically, right? Or try to not hustle. And then when he is working at the sandwich shop, and he doesn't need to be hustling, he gets in someone's car.
Yeah, and his mother has sent him a ticket to come home.
And this is the day before Christmas Eve, and he's supposed to fly home on Christmas Eve.
And he goes out on the outskirts of town with this guy, and the guy's very violent, and he essentially rapes him. Yeah. So he wakes up and he's dumped out onto the front, like outside of this apartment building. And then he's just completely fucked up. And he also, at one point, Neil references his friend, like, finds certain photos that were taken from when he was molested. And Neil at some point references that past as though it was kind of a positive thing, as though it was like something very meaningful to him, that someone really, really loved him and cared about him. And there's another point where he's announcing like the baseball games, and he's giving this kid a prize, and it's not overt, but he's affectionate enough with the kid, just enough where you're like, oh no, is this that cyclical thing that's going to become something?
I did wonder that, but I don't think that, because he was very attracted to older men.
Right, that was
he was still in that same mindset, but he did have like a care for a child.
Yeah.
But I didn't think it was bad. But he did say to his friend, he was like, you got to reward kids when they do things. And so he did kind of have that mentality of giving rewards to children for doing things, which I'm sure was the same when he was with that man. Yeah, before he leaves town, he has his friend drive him to the house where the coach used to live. And he stands outside the house and he says something like, call me your angel. Yeah. Or something, like, because that's what the man called him. And then they leave town. And he does talk to the girl, because she's the only one he's ever told. And he does say, he was like, you're the only one I ever told about that summer. And I'm just realizing how much that summer has like influenced my entire life. So he was kind of coming to that already, I think, once he was seeing these like different aspects of humanity that he hadn't seen in his small town, maybe kind of questioning why he does what he does.
Yeah. Brian's memory is that he was in Halloween and he was separated and he loses his glasses.
Yeah,
and
that's
then,
the second time
and then
he
something, and then a being, or we know it was the Little League coach, approaches him because apparently he had been gone for a minute.
2 years.
Yeah, and then they reunited.
I think he came to that town maybe looking for any of the little boys. You know, like he obviously had gone away. So
Yeah.
maybe he came, it was Halloween, maybe he came back just to see. That's disgusting, but.
So Neil returns home and Brian and with Eric finally is reunited with Neil. But Brian, I think at this point, Brian knows that maybe this UFO thing isn't really what's going on here. So he reunites with Neil and it culminates into the climactic scene.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that is, a lot of movies that deal with this issue, well, without getting into a lot of details, will kind of just allude to it. And often what you could passively imagine is horrible and is enough to fill the gaps. But they go to where this guy used to live.
They break into the house.
Brian and Neil, they break into the house. It's Christmas Eve, so another, like Tangerine, another weird-ass Christmas movie, right?
Yeah, but Neil's
but
basically
completely
like,
different than Tangerine.
oh my God, yes.
But, so they sit down, and Brian's like, tell me everything. Yeah. And they talk about how this guy picked up Brian, and they were going to give him a ride home, and they stopped by his house first. Neil and Brian were together, and we're not going to describe what was described.
No.
But that's kind of what is so different, is that, and it's filmed in such a subtle way that's disturbing, but not visually revealing, and describes exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Like the description of the act occurred.
And he keeps, Neil also, as he's telling this to Brian, he definitely keeps alluding to this happened all summer with different little boys.
Yeah.
Neil was always there. He was the special one. But there were other boys that they had like a game they played, where he knew what to say to like make the other little boy more comfortable or some shit. Like it was fucked up. It's totally fucked up.
And as Neil is revealing, and Brian's like, tell me more. Brian starts to lay his head on his shoulder and then lays his head in his lap as Neil just straightforward. And, Brian has always known that something is wrong. It is very obvious to him that he is disaffected. But Neil, we see this guy who's unquestioning his sexual proclivities. He never even wore protection. And he had been hustling for years at that point. And when he referenced the past and that incident, he referenced it as something in which that gave him a weird sense of purpose, a sense of love. And you can tell that as he's describing, saying it all out loud with someone else who was there, who is now grown, it's kind of washing over. You get that Neil never really questioned why he was damaged or if he ever was. But you can tell that as Neil is explaining this to Brian, that it is kind of washing over him just how completely fucked this whole thing is. And without even saying it particularly, you can kind of see that Neil's life is kind of washing over him as he's describing in detail what happened to them in that Little League coach's house.
There's also an immense amount of care that Neil is showing to Brian in this moment. Like he keeps checking in with him. Are you okay? Do you want me to keep going? I can stop. Mm-hmm. And Brian's like, no, I need to know. I need to know everything. And he tells him everything in that disturbing detail. And then when he's done, there's some carolers who are singing outside because it's Christmas Eve. And Neil is just kind of, Brian's head is in his lap. He's just kind of holding him. And they've narrated a lot of this movie, both of them. And his voice comes on and says, I wanted to tell him that I was sorry, but I couldn't talk. And I think that's because of exactly what you just said. Like, he got to the point where, like, he was then even questioning, like, he felt sorry, but also it was like he was finally realizing, like, how much he had been mistreated himself. And that though he played a part in this, that it wasn't his fault.
No. I mean, since he was able to on his own, his life was at a 10, just constantly going, subconsciously trying to recreate the emotion and connection and what he thinks is love that he felt at that time.
Yeah, he even says that he couldn't remember exactly who Brian was until he saw his face.
Yeah.
Like, he'd kind of blocked out some of those pieces, probably, where there were other kids.
Young Brian, I essentially pretty much look like that, but with curly hair.
I know.
That's what I look like as a kid.
That kid had curly hair.
Yeah. It was like not super pup, not like a cotton ball, but.
Oh, okay.
But you notice that Gregg Araki, I was trying to, it's been so long since I've seen Doom Generation. The font that Araki used looked very familiar. Like, I think that is kind of his font, but in terms of the scene displays. But you notice that whenever he would transition to cut to other scenes, it wasn't like a quick cut, but it was like this blackout that like fade out to black for like a half a second. They almost felt like brief blackouts, like as there's cutting to certain points in the story, which kind of felt awkward, but maybe it was meant to feel a little awkward, but yeah.
I didn't actually even pick up on that.
There's no movie like this one, and we caught this on a strand releasing channel on our Prime. We actually paid $5 a month, and it's like a Prime channel on the Fire Stick, and this Strand app had this and maybe a couple other Gregg Araki movies, but also it's like full of just new queer cinema stuff,
which is amazing.
I don't know what other form you can get that. Maybe you can go directly onto the side of the Strand releasing or whatever. But it seems like a lot of modern queer cinema seems to be located on there. If you're interested in that sort of thing. This is honestly I can put this up there with one of the most fucked up movies I've ever seen. But fucked up in a way that is like bizarrely important.
I think that people should watch this movie.
Yeah.
It's fucking hard, but people need to see it.
And let me reiterate. It describes the acts.
Yeah, in very, very much detail.
Yeah, especially at the climax at the end of the scene. It's like Brian can't remember anything. Neil is literally telling him everything that happened. So if you have a personal history with that, be warned. But there might be something cathartic educational here.
Yeah,
with how. This might be the most what's the word for real, like verisimilitude? It felt very real.
It did feel very real, and I agree with you that if someone has history with this, maybe this is not the right movie for you to watch, but it could be the right movie for you to tell someone about in your life who doesn't understand what you've maybe been through. I think educational is true. It is. It's And like we said, it tells this story in ways that we've never seen before. And then seeing it through the eyes of the person who was abused in this way, it was disturbing, but so honest. It felt so honest. We
rate movies. I don't want to say hump.
No, please don't.
I'm trying to think of how personal I want to get here. But we're married. We're grown. And earlier in the day, we were like, look, later that night, why don't we do what married adults do later that night? Yeah. But first we're going to watch a movie. We're going to watch this movie, Mysterious Skin by Gregg Araki.
And then have some adult time.
Yeah. And then after this movie, it was like, no, there ain't no this shit. Not tonight.
Nope.
Maybe not for like,
haven't.
Maybe not for like minimum 48 hours. Yeah, there's no way.
Not going to be tonight either after talking about this.
That's true.
Not happening.
But you're going to give this 1 through 5. I'm going to give this 1 through 5 combined for best out of 10.
Everyone in this movie had an amazing performance.
This may be Gregg Araki's, since at this point in his career, one of his more, his movies have always been kind of divisive.
Yeah.
But this movie had probably the most broad universal acclaim. But I can't imagine that many people watched it,
And the growth. I mean, because obviously, like, Doom Generation, I've seen so many times when I was younger. Like, I was obsessed with it for a bit. And from that it's the guy who made that to this man who made this, like, I don't know. It feels like, I don't know what else he's done since then, but I would watch anything after watching the way he did this film.
I give it a 4 point. I think it sits at a 4 easy. So you got to think about like what it represents and how well it represents it. I'm going to go a 4.25.
I'm going to give it a 4.5.
Okay. So that makes it an 8.75. That's an easy layup A tier. That's the exact same score we gave Fox and His Friends. I'm going to say, as far as the 8.75 go, that this actually is better than Fox and His Friends.
I agree.
Fox and His Friends was an interesting commentary on class, but it was almost so over the top how, like, completely, like, divided these natures were,
Yes, and there was some brevity
Yeah.
in Fox and His Friends. A little more fun. I don't know.
More fun than this. Yeah. See our review there. It's under Cold War and above Fox and His Friends. The ratings are weird. Like, there might be a movie that I would have technically rated higher, but that doesn't mean necessarily that it's like my favorite movie compared here.
Sure.
So that, movies can strike you in different ways. So even if you look down on this A list, there something that I may have rated a little higher, but wouldn't maybe linger as much with me. Like Mysterious Skin's going to linger with me more than Cold War is. Even though the execution of Cold War and how much we love sad fucking movies does kind of like maybe edge it. So there's a difference between a score and what really affects you deeply. And at some point, like, A's are all A's and S's are all S's, and A's might as well be S's. You all right there? It took you didn't start really crying until the very end.
I just can't stop thinking about it now. Honestly, think when we were done talking about it, just thinking about it got to me.
Well, it's something, all right. So check it, but be warned. Check this movie out, but be warned. Check our show notes for links and other places to find us. We've got one last. Queer cinema can be so sad, but let's hope this one's a little more affirming. That we're going to close Movies Are Gay with.
I hope so.
That's the first time I've said movies are gay in this whole recording. But anyway.
What? Movies are so gay.
But yeah, check our links in the show notes to find us.
Death to all traitors.
Death to all traitors.